Hey, welcome back. My name is Jacqueline, J for short. And today I wanted to talk about what it was like being a woman Uber driver. I actually did Uber in Los Angeles. So you can imagine how crazy the traffic was, and I got to deal with all kinds of people. I actually started doing Uber because when I moved to Los Angeles, I found it to be so overwhelming. I was also going through a very difficult transition, and I felt like I was losing my identity. I had been a single mom for so long, and my daughter was heading off to college, and I just lost all sense of self. I was very wrapped up in being her mom. And so two things were kind of driving me: wanting to get to know the city better and not feeling so overwhelmed and lost. And another thing was just something pulling me to kind of connect with people, because it felt very lonely in Los Angeles, even though I feel like that's the thing about big cities. There's so many people and so much going on, but it can also feel very lonely and isolating, especially if you're going through a depression or something. So I kind of wanted to jump on here because a lot of people have asked me, what was it like to be a woman and be an Uber driver? And they always love to hear stories. So I kind of wanted to talk to those who are interested in maybe being an Uber driver, or just interested in hearing what it is to be an Uber driver and be a woman. I'm going to probably break this up in two parts, just depending how much I share. But it'll just be me telling my experience and stories of, people, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So like I mentioned, I really wanted to do Uber so that I can get to know the city better, so I wouldn't feel lost. And I know that I was searching for connection, even if I didn't know that at the time. And one of my very first few rides was actually this gentleman who was in finance. And I gave him a ride to the airport, and I really got to know people because Los Angeles has so much traffic. You can be in a car with someone for as little as 20 to an hour and something. So anyways, I pick up this gentleman, and we start talking. And that was another thing. People, as an Uber driver, because you're a stranger, and I think because I was a woman, people really opened up to me and told me a lot of things about their lives, and were very open and vulnerable. So I was always very appreciative about that. And I think the way to have people be open and be vulnerable is that you do it as well. So anyway, this gentleman, we started talking, and he actually worked in finance. And at the time, like I said, I was dealing with identity loss. I wasn't sure what was next for me. And so we started talking, and I said, do you love your job? Because I really never liked any of the jobs that I did. I just did them because it was a way for me to provide, not just obviously for myself, but also for my daughter. And I also had mentioned that a lot of people in the company that worked at previously were getting laid off, and I was wanting to get laid off because when you got laid off at a big firm, you got a nice severance package. So I kind of just talked to him about this because he mentioned that he really actually liked what he did, which was, he didn't work in finance. He actually worked as a recruiter with attorneys. He went to law school, but he didn't want to do work in law. He didn't want to be an attorney, but he did appreciate the law, and he realized that what he really loved was to help other attorneys find the perfect firm for them, so that they can be happy in doing what they love to do, but also be happy at the place that they were working at. And so I asked him, do you love it? And he's like, he goes, I actually really, really do love what I do. And one of the things that he said that really captivated me is that he said, but just because I love what I do is not who I am. And I said, really? And he said, you mentioned that a lot of people were being laid off, and they were losing it, and they were just so afraid to lose their job, or not work for that firm. And he said, honestly, what they were really afraid of was losing their identity. And that just really clicked for me, because that's where I was at. I was losing my identity, and it's the in-between where you don't know who you are. You know who you used to be, but who you are now, it's feeling empty. You're feeling like you're no one. And if you get so wrapped up in something, it can actually cause you to have a breakdown and a depression. And so when he said that, it just clicked. I'm like, oh, I said they were identified by their jobs, by what they did. And I was never identified by that because for me, it was just a way to make money and support my daughter. And what I was really wrapped up around was being a single mom. Like, that's where my identity was. And I said, oh, so who do you feel you really are? And he said, honestly, who I feel I really am is someone who's here to help people in the world. And I do that in my job, but what really like fulfills me and is like my soul calling is he's all to give back to youth. He was actually working with youth at group homes, foster homes, anything like that, you name it. And he said that he loved it, that kids are really, because these were teenagers, he said, these kids are so hard to work with. He's like, if you have any insecurity, because he was balding, he's like, if you have any insecurity, I mean, they will come for you. He's like, so they really humble you. And even if you have this insecurity, yeah, they come for you. But then you learn to like just laugh about it, not take things so serious. And he's like, I love working with them. And the reason that I do the job that I do, he's like, it pays really well. And yes, I enjoy it. He's all, but if it was over and I could never do it again tomorrow, I'd be fine. He's all, because ultimately my purpose here is to help others, and particularly like young men. He goes, that's what I was meant and put here to do. And he goes, and I think that's like the biggest gift. He's like, you know how they say when you figure out what your purpose is, that's how you figure what your reason is for being here. I know that there's a saying, so if anyone knows what that saying is, please put it below. And I love speaking to him all the way to the airport. He really helped me. And when he was like about to get off and go to the airport, he's like, thank you so much for this conversation and for letting me talk to you about like what I do. It was so interesting. I'm so grateful. But that's how I felt. I felt like so seen and understood. And I felt like in a lot of those, I'll talk more stories, but in a lot of those rides, I just really felt like it was spirit speaking to me through these people. And there was like an exchange between us. I felt like, you know, whatever you believe in, universe, spirit, God, I feel like that's the way that spirit speaks to us. I feel like he speaks to us through these experiences and through these people when we're in our most open space. And I felt that when you have two strangers and there's no like, people aren't viewing you in a certain way, right? And you're vulnerable and open, these things and people come into your life. And I'm just saying this in case you're going through anything, what being open to what you're struggling, like what life can bring you. And I'm saying all that to say, because I felt when I did Uber that every time someone got in the car, even if it was a great experience to a horrible experience, I felt it was a way of my answers, of my questions being answered. And it also gave me a lot more questions that I had. And I was just really like grateful for that. I actually did it for almost 2 years. So it's insane that I was working like crazy hours, and in part because I was dealing with the depression, and in another part just trying to also connect and get me out of like that brokenness and that depression that I was dealing with. So another story is, it's actually just a small one. I was having a really difficult day, and I'm starting to get emotional right now. Like, I was having a really difficult day, and like I said, LA is very tense. There's a lot of tension, and because there's so much traffic, so many people, so much energy in the air. And, you know, I'm dealing with my own stuff. And I remember that this guy, he was a bartender, he gets in and there was like a song playing. He goes, oh my God, he goes, I love this song. And like, can you turn it up? And I like the song too. So like, it literally was probably like a maybe to 5-10 minute ride, because he was just trying to get from his place to where he worked. And I turn the music up and he just starts dancing in the back, and both of us start dancing, singing along. And it was just, it lifted my spirits so much. And when I get like, literally, like, I think the song started, when it ended, he was about to get off, so it wasn't that long. But when he gets off, he's like, thanks so much. He's all, that really lifted my spirits. And I was like, if only he knew, like, what a, like, horrible day I was having, feeling just lonely, just like, just in a really bad place, and how the music and this connection with his beautiful open energy and us singing like he was my best friend, and we're in the car just singing, how that lifted me. And it was such a like small moment that you probably think about, but in that moment, like that shared moment with the stranger, over music, over dancing, and just kind of, you know, trying to lift our spirit, it just meant so much to me. And the reason I mention that is because I hope that a lot of the times we're looking for this like big thing, right, to change us, to like change our lives. But sometimes maybe we just need a good song to sing to cry to. Maybe sometimes we just need a connection, even if it's just with a complete stranger, because we both like the song and we both know it. So that's one little story and memory that I will never forget, that guy, because it was so like special to me, and he just really lifted my spirits. He may not even remember me, but I will always remember him. There's a saying that says, people may not always remember your name, but they will remember how you made them feel. And I will always remember how I felt sharing that moment with him. Another experience, there's so many, but I want to talk about it. I worked all hours. I mean, I worked 9 to 5. I worked from 6. I started at work at 5 sometimes. Sometimes I worked all the way to 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. So I was working nights. So I got to meet people from all walks of life. I got to meet directors, producers, musicians. I got to meet a lot of women. I would say a lot. I feels like a lot, because you don't really meet a lot of women in the tech industry, and specifically women in the tech industry that have really high positions. And I got to meet these two women that were very memorable. One of them was this woman. She was from Venezuela, and I remember because she was absolutely beautiful. Long hair, everything you can just imagine. Long hair, had the most sexy accent, and she was just so open and kind and welcoming. So she gets in, and we start talking, and I don't know how the conversation led. I asked her, I said, how is it, you know, I asked her, where is your accent from? I said, it sounds so nice. And she told me where she was from, and I asked her, how was it when you moved here from another country? Because she moved here by herself. She told me that it was very difficult to move here, but she had moved here because of work, and also because she wanted obviously more opportunities and to move up in her industry. And she said that the one thing that she did was that she, in order for her to stay accountable and make sure that she wasn't just going to work, was to make sure that something outside of herself kept her accountable. And so one of them was that I remember she said she went to dance classes, and the other one was to make sure that she was at least networking once a week tops. Wanted to really max at least do 2 or 3. And she said it was really difficult for her because obviously this job that she had just started, it was a higher position. She was working a lot of hours. And she said, you know, I had spent so much time, a few months here, and I felt so alone and isolated. I was away from my family, my friends, everything. But I just made this commitment that I was going to at least go to one network a week and just put myself out there. She's like, it didn't matter what the networking was. It didn't have to be far. It didn't have to be specific. It's just me getting out there and making sure that I'm meeting people. She's like, because I don't want to give myself the excuse that I'm lonely here, it's not working out. It's like, I came here and I'm doing the best I can and I'm putting myself out there. And for me, at that time, I was feeling just so alone, and I was just feeling so isolated. I missed my daughter. I missed like our old life. And I wasn't really doing anything besides, Uber, which was a job at the end of the day. And I wasn't really putting myself out there. I thought I was, because here I am doing Uber and I'm talking to people. But at the end of the day, I was working, and I wasn't really putting myself out there outside of my job. And so that really stuck to me. She said that really helped her to not only, she said things started turning around. She started, going to a lot of the same networks and meeting, and she started seeing people that she would see in other networks, and then she started dating. So she actually got to a point where she started making friends and connections, and she started dating, and then she eventually met her boyfriend. That was one thing that I feel like I needed to start putting myself out there and making a commitment. And I would say that for you as well, if there are things that you want in life and you thought about it and you've been struggling with, is finding accountability outside yourself, and also thinking about the excuses that you're making and how to like get rid of those and kind of like call yourself out. Like, hey, this is happening and I'm complaining about it, but what is it that I'm really doing? And what is it outside of myself that can really keep me accountable so that I can get out of this environment and into a new one? And she told me it took a few months. It wasn't like after 30 days, She definitely said that she was going to at least give herself 30 days. And she did. And she saw that things were happening. And eventually, like she mentioned, she started meeting people, she started making friends, and then she started to get into a relationship. And her job was, as a woman, as an executive, she was in her masculine many times because of the position she was in. And so part of her going out to go dance was her staying in her feminine, and also in part going out and meeting people and being vulnerable was her putting and exuding that femininity to stay open and vulnerable. So the second story that I want to talk about, because I've been talking about femininity and vulnerability and putting ourselves out there, is another woman who I met who was a CEO in a textile design industry. She was actually managing hundreds of people, and not just here in the US, but also in, I believe it was China. And I said to her, how is it being a woman in your industry and working with men, not just here, but like overseas? And she said something that was so interesting to me. In the US, there's a lot of masculine energy here. And if you really want to be taken serious as a woman, you oftentimes have to be very masculine in your approach. She's like, when it comes to people here, I just always let people run and do it. She's like, I don't micromanage. I always see what people's strengths are, and I always make sure that I'm valuing that I'm giving them the space to continue to like upgrade their strengths, if that makes sense. And I asked her to elaborate. And she said, when it comes to overseas, she's like, I'm not always there. She goes, I can't be there. I can't be on top of people. And when I go overseas, I can't be on top of people here. So I have to trust them. I have to trust that the people that were put in that position before I came here, or even after I came here, I trust them, that their strengths, that the way they're leading, the way they're running their team, I have to trust them. And she's like, and by trusting them, especially when it comes to men, she's like, I am allowing myself to be in my feminine by allowing them to be in their masculine and trust that they're good leaders. And when it came overseas, what I realized is that men really do want to be our heroes. And now in this day and age, she's like, men aren't really allowed to like be our heroes, right? We're very independent. We're in these executive positions. We're in these high levels. We're making a lot more money, sometimes more than men. So what's being lost is that masculine and feminine energy, even within ourselves. Even women, we've lost our sense of femininity sometimes. And she's especially when it comes to older men, she's and in overseas, they want to be my hero, you know. So I allow them to be, you know. There are things that need to get done, and sometimes there are deadlines that are pushed up and things happen, and timelines are shortened. And what I do is I talk to them and I say, hey, I really need your help. I know that this deadline was moved up, but if you can please, like, really help me with this. I honestly really need your help. Is there any way that you can do it? And what can I do for you? But you let me know. If this is too hard, please tell me. But I really need this done, and it needs to be done in this timeline. Can you please help me? And she's like, you will be so surprised how quick these men are to just move like heaven and mountain, as they say, to try to meet that deadline for me. They really do want to show up for me. They want to be my hero. They want to like make sure that I meet my deadline. She's like, and every time that I've done that come from a position where I'm vulnerable, where I allow them to lead, where I ask them for their help, basically allow them to be, you know, my hero and show up. And I'm always very appreciative of all their hard work. Things just move. She's like, you would think that if you're in a higher position, you need to be more masculine and you need to be more aggressive and you need to be more in people's face. She's like, but what I have found, that the higher I move in the position, the more I'm in my feminine, the higher I rise, the better my team does, the more my team grows, the more people show up for me, the more people want to help me, and the more I want to help them, and the more I want to become a better leader. She's like, if women would realize that our leadership can come from this very feminine space, and allowing men to, you know, be our heroes in a way and be vulnerable and open, we would have such a better balance. At least she's like, that's what I found. And I just really love that, because I've never gotten that perspective when it came to masculine and feminine energy. And I really love the way she put it, because I really feel like, did I say really enough? I feel that we don't stay as much as we should in our feminine when it comes to being women, right? To being open and vulnerable. And I understand it's because we've had to be really independent. We've had to really take care of ourselves in a lot of instances. And I'm talking about here in the US. But I know that when I'm dealing with, you know, people in Mexico or other like cultures, and I realize like older generations, the way they carry themselves in this dance of feminine and masculine, it could be really beautiful when the masculine is not overtaking the feminine, or the feminine is not trying to be masculine and aggressive. There's actually this beautiful flow that happens. And I really love the way she put it, of allowing men to be our heroes and allowing ourselves to be in our feminine and open and allowing things to happen. So I was so grateful to her in that conversation. And this video is already getting long, so I'm gonna actually do a part 2, and that's where I'm gonna talk about the bad and the ugly. But I still have some other stories and lessons that I've learned from Uber. But if you have any questions, part 2 is coming up. And just leave your questions below. And if you're an Uber driver, or if you're a woman Uber driver, I would love to learn what Uber has been for you.